myself. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session on Monday at the London Student Sustainability Conference. My name is Barbara Czarnecka. I'm going to be chairing this session. Normally, I work at London South Bank University, and I'm an associate professor in marketing. I do a little bit research about consumer behavior, sustainability, university. So that's my area. We have three presenters today, and our first presenter is here, second over there, and third over here. And I will introduce each presenter to everyone. Every presenter has 10 minutes to present, and then about 3 to 5 minutes for questions and comments. Okay. So the first, and I'll be telling you how much time you have. So I'll sit over there and keep the time, so you know how much time you have. So you have 10 minutes to present, 5 minutes for questions and comments. So the first presenter comes from GCU London. Akinbane Kahinde, and if you want to correct me, please do if I mispronounced your name. And the session topic is leveraging amalgamated sources of finance for the SDGs in sub-Saharan Africa. So if I could just invite you here. Okay. Look at the camera, stand here. And then, yes, I'll shout to let you know how much time you have.
Yeah, the mic is. That's it. Thanks. That's just an overview. I'm going to talk about the introduction, the background, the problem statements, objectives, the methodology, and research questions. In terms of our SDGs, the SDGs are supposed to stimulate action in critical areas of humanity, most especially in terms of poverty, trends, sustainability, climate change, and everything. But when we look at everything, when we look at the whole of SDG scores all over African countries, most of it actually is stagnant in terms of indicators. Only 95% of African states are actually making progress towards ending hunger. And we know hunger and poverty is a big deal in the world now. That's according to Sachs et al. 2021. So therefore, in terms of my background, I'm looking at the SDG financing gap. When we talk about the financing gap for SDGs, the 17 SDGs, most of them needs to be financed. We don't talk about funding again. Funding simply means that we get money thrown to us in those countries, especially in the global south. But now we expect those investors in those parts of the world also to take part in financing SDGs. So financing is a better word. And from what we have now, public finance is largely insufficient. So we say in private capital is also important, especially when we look at all these pension funds that has loads of unutilized finance that they can use to solve this problem. So in terms of the problem statement, we're looking at the local dimensions of financing. As I said, we expect that the local investors should also take part in financing SDGs in sub-Saharan Africa. From the talk we've had today, I think one of the key points that we've had is that when it comes to sustainability, it's not a one point fits all. Everybody should be involved. And that's not all. Most of the issues that we have in Global South, most especially in Africa, are systemic in nature according to UNCTAD 2019. So when we look at all this in total, climate change is actually a wicked problem, apart from the fact that we need to take funding from different sectors. It also necessitates different actors taking part in this. So a complex thinking and a collaborative approach is very, very important. And that's one of the problems of this, of my research. So in terms of my research objectives, I'm actually looking at what are those factors that are not allowing all these private sector actors to take part in funding or sustainability projects in sub-Saharan Africa. To look at that, I'm actually proposing the use of what we call the system dynamics paradigm. The paradigm is based on the systems theory. The system theory is a theory that actually looks at what we call events, stocks, and flows in terms of different aspects of them coming together and seeing the kind of dynamics that happen there. And if we are able to do that very well in the system dynamics model, it is easy for you to be able to see areas of maximum influence, and those areas will actually help with policy formulation. So that's what I'm proposing in my research. When we look at this, when we look at the whole lot now in terms of this methodology or strategy, that's what we call the causal loop diagram there. It's a diagram that talks about the different connections or interconnections between components that makes up a system. In the finance system, we can look at the economic growth there, the energy demand, technology, effective and innovative bottom-up approach in terms of financing. And from here, we can actually look at those arrows there. They say something. Those arrows have positive polarity. For example, if you look at the polarity between available capital and technology, it's positive. So that simply translates to the fact that available capital or going straight to technology will actually be important, and that can actually help with energy demand. For example, in Africa now, solar is has a lot of potential in Africa, especially because of when we look at the climate, when we also look at the equator, look at the position of that continent on the equator, solar can have potential. So again, solar needs available funding, and that will actually help to meet energy assets in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, that means the energy supply. That's exactly what the polarity is showing all around there. Now, this is a research in view. So obviously, most of the work that has to be done in the field in terms of collecting data to see what are those connections between those components that make up the system. And if you're able to do that, this research has a lot of contributions that it can actually make to the body of knowledge. I think one of the key contributions will be the understanding intervention points. We don't really, as of today, understand those points in a finance system or model. Where can we come in? Where can investors come in? Where can pension funds come in? Where can private sector investors also come in? So that's what the beauty of my research is going to be. Again, it's going to advance our knowledge of what we call the system or that stakeholder perspective. From the talk we had at the morning, just from the great talk, the speaker was talking about bottom down and top up models in terms of solving problems. In sustainability, it has always been the top down. People everywhere in the world will tell you this is the way it should be done. But obviously, sustainability should be done on a bottom-up approach. Those that are actually suffering should be the one making decisions on their own on where they think this funding should be targeted at. And that's exactly what my research is going to be looking at, by also helping at the end of the day to be able to meet what we call the higher order patterns. Again, where private finance can actually be unlocked in sub-Saharan Africa. Those are my references. But I think because of the beauty of what we're doing today, some of the things that we can be take home today in terms of for what I have for my colleagues and those also that are here today and those even listening at home on here is what can we do in terms of finance as students, as sustainability enthusiasts? What can we actually do? I think one of the key things that we can do is we can now start looking at creating initiatives that can actually create awareness about financing for sustainability, especially in the most vulnerable parts of the world. The key reason why I'm talking about Sub-Saharan Africa is South Africa did not contribute to the climate crisis. The continent is not, in terms of emissions, it's not anywhere in the world in terms of the first 40, the first 50, but that continent will suffer more than any other part of the world. That continent is more vulnerable than any other continent of the world. So obviously it's important for us to start saying, this is time for us to start looking at initiatives. Otherwise, it's going to be a case of climate justice, and we don't want that to happen. It's already bearing its fruit, but we are saying initiatives can come from students like us, like me, like you, in terms of making awareness, making people understand why we should not allow Africa to turn to what has happened to the West and being landlocked to carbon. So that is one thing we can do. Another thing is we can also start understanding now and how we can educate ourselves on what we can do in terms of financing, especially for those vulnerable. And finally, this is something we've been doing here. London Sustainability Society has been very good with this. We can start a students' association or an initiative here that can talk about financing sustainable projects in Sub-Saharan Africa. And that's my speech today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was perfect timing because we still have about 2-3 minutes for questions or comments or discussions. Are there any questions?
Thanks very much, Kevin, for your presentation. I do understand that maybe the lighting from the back here maybe dinner for subsequent presentation. Like we got to see. But I just wanted to ask you, I mean, what informed the choice of the proposed methodology, i.e. system thinking, system analysis? Why for the Global South? And what is the origin of this?
I think the origin of the Global South, as I said, is when we look at what's happening in the world, climate change is actually a big issue here. As I was coming in Extinction Rebellion, they were out there talking about leaflets. We're looking at sustainability here. We're looking at activists actually fighting this. This part of the world will not even suffer that much like those parts in the Global South. So that's the first key thing for me is that this is justice. This is injustice, really. In those people that actually are going to suffer more are actually not the one that actually led to this in the first instance. So that is one. Then two, when we look at what has been done in terms of all the COPs that have happened in the past, 1 billion has actually been said that will be given to this part of the world for financing. Where would the money come from? We know what the impact of COVID did for the whole world in the last 2-3 years. We've not actually recovered from that. So the money has to come elsewhere apart from public enterprises. So that's another aspect of it. And being coming from private sectors is because he's already said there are loads of funds there in those private sector, in pension funds, institutional investors that have not been used for sustainability. ESG is raising its hand all over the world now. If we want to face this future and we want to make sure that we take care of what is happening in financing, especially those that will suffer more, will be very important to us because we don't want to leave anybody behind when it comes to the fighting climate change. Thank you very much, sir.
Very much. Any other questions?
South Africa committed to adopt the SDGs in the time frame. But do you have any commitment for the SDGs?
When you look at Sub-Saharan Africa, you may actually take South African from me as a country. I mean now, South Africa is doing very well when it comes to sustainability. Really, they are doing very well. So when you look at that, we can use South Africa as a case study for other parts of the world. Again, I think it has to do with the kind of interaction that they had in the past with those, with the West. So South Africa is actually doing well when it comes to sustainability. But when we look at other parts of the world, in terms of financing is there, but the particular problems of those parts is also very important. Economic problems are there, social economic problems are also there. When you compare South Africa to Nigeria in terms of even energy access, in terms of inflation, currency risk, it's not the same. So in my project, I rather want to just use South Africa as a case study, then look at other parts of those countries in Africa that actually are going to suffer more than what, and because of their economic indicators not in favor for financing. That's an aspect I want to look at. Thanks for the question, Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now we have our second presenter, who is my own PhD student. So it's a nice coincidence. Nashwa from London South Bank University is going to tell us a little bit more about corporate communications using, and I have to look at your title to get it right, because I don't want to, okay. The consumer of today cares about tomorrow, the perception of consumers in Egypt on corporate social responsibility communication. Nashwa Nader, London South Bank University. Over to you, Nashwa. Thank you. There you go. And I'll sit here and I'll let you know when you go.
Okay. We live in a time of major changes. We're experiencing changes in society, changes in the weather, but one of the big changes that we're experiencing is that the consumer of today cares about tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nashwa Nader. I'm in my last year of PhD at London South Bank. Barbara is my supervisor, and I'm also a lecturer in marketing. So what's the background of all this? How did this all start? This all began when consumers started to have a lot of easy access to information. So they are becoming more aware of all the sly and devious marketing tactics that companies are doing, and it's not working anymore. Also, they are expecting more from big multinational companies. They're expecting them to give back to society, to be more socially responsible, and that's just the expectation. So everything has started to shift from traditional media to new media, from social content, from commercial content to social content, and that's just the new change. This is the preference of consumers nowadays. And we can see it everywhere in London. This is just me taking pictures off the street. Everyone is doing this change. And if there's any company that's not embracing this change, they are already late to this conversation. So yes, definitely change is brewing. And while we're seeing this shift in media viewership habits, still the dominant media is television. It has the highest brand awareness. It's the best media, yet the new social media is growing much faster, and companies are spending according to that. So still, companies are spending more in television advertising, even though we think it's declining, but it's not. Especially in the field of fast-moving consumer goods, or FMCG. This field, they are spending a lot, and it's expected by the end of this year, they would spend on advertising $30 billion. That's 30 with 9 zeros. That's a lot of money. So money is not an issue. They do have the money. It's just the question is this the best way to spend this money? Is this the most effective, efficient way? Now, what if we take the United Nations 17 SDGs? Can these be used as a much more effective communication strategy? This is the question, and this is what I'm going to find out from my research. Definitely CSR communication, or corporate social responsibility, has a lot of benefits, like positive word of mouth, positive awareness, positive brand reputation, increase of employee engagement, and a lot of great benefits and outcomes for the company. But all these benefits will be captured if certain strategies were taken into consideration. This corporate social responsibility campaign needs to be proactive in nature, transparent with consumers, sharing a good deal of details and information, and most importantly, it has to be relevant to the people and the audience that you are operating in. So this brings me to the overall objective of my research. The objective is to investigate the benefits of CSR communication and compare these benefits to non-CSR communication on different communication channels in Egypt. This will be reflecting on the third United Nations SDG to promote good health and well-being. These are my research questions. Mainly, I'm focusing on looking at the difference in attitudes and behaviors between CSR communication and non-CSR communication, basically social communication and the commercial ads that we've been seeing for a very long time and we're bored of. And we're comparing these two effects on different media vehicles like television and social media. I've conducted 2x2 experiments on 474 consumers in Egypt, and these are the 4 groups. And the hypothetical experiment was done on Dettol. It's a very big brand, very well known in Egypt for cleaning and disinfection in households. So the CSR campaign was that the hypothetical campaign, this brand will open a free outpatient clinic in a very poor town in Egypt. This is the campaign. And the non-CSR campaign is the usual commercial ad that we see talking about the benefits and the functions of how to use the brand and what are the benefits of this brand. And I'm comparing on the benefit of both campaigns, both kind of advertising, both advertising strategies. I'm using the halo effect theory, which states that when you do a certain action, you might have an impact on unrelated behavior, like intention or purchase intention. I'm also using the theory of planned behavior, which takes into account certain attitudes that we feel towards an ad, towards advertising, towards commercials, and then these attitudes translate into an intention of an action, and then finally, the final behavior. Based on these two theories, I've constructed this to be my research model in which the attitudes is ad likability, brand likability, emotional brand attachment, perceived brand functionality, and finally, brand trust. And this will lead into the final outcome, which is purchase intention. You see, I'm trying to speak the company's language because I come from a corporate background. And at the end of the day, I know that multinationals, all what they care about is the bottom line, which is to increase sales, to increase purchase, to make money, to make profit. And that's okay. We just have to find a way to provide them with a compelling argument that these kind of communication will still be giving them the end goal, which is to increase sales or increase purchase. Moving on to the results, the questionnaire was reliable. Based on Cronbach's alpha, it all loaded to be higher than 0.8. I'm not going to bore you with too much technical details. And because the core of the research, this is the main contribution. This is the first research to compare between CSR as a communication strategy and non-CSR communication strategies. So I had to compare between both using t-tests. And as we can see, all the averages for all the variables were higher in the CSR, which is the bar on the right. It was higher for CSR. When we look at the comparison between television and social media in Egypt, television was still deemed to be a much more successful media vehicle that people preferred and trusted more than social media. Based on the results, there were direct effects of CSR communication on ad likability, emotional brand attachment, brand trust, and all these variables had a direct positive effect on purchase intention. And this was the main objective of the study. So finally, I can confidently say that CSR communication is a much more effective way of communication in terms of ad likability, emotional brand attachment, brand trust, more than non-CSR communication. It has a direct large effect, which has a direct large effect on purchase intention. There's definitely room for further research. I'm conducting another qualitative study to gain deeper insights on why people think this way, why people in Egypt think this way. And also I'm inviting other researchers to do this comparison in other parts of the world and investigate on different types of CSR communication on different SDGs other than health and well-being. This is the main contribution, is to compare two of these communication strategies and the different media vehicles and expanding the literature in the Middle East. But most importantly, the practical contribution is to provide a compelling argument that CSR communication is much more effective for the company than non-CSR communication, and it still reflects on the bigger topic and reflects on the new trend, which is the consumer of today cares about tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Very much, Nashwa. Again, perfect timing. So we now have about 3 to 5 minutes for questions and comments. I think Nakash was first. I'll
Yeah.
go from my left side to go.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a good presentation. Now, CSR reporting is sometimes viewed from the lens of philanthropy-centered reporting, where companies are likely to report all the groups and hide the bad. We have systemic problems with supply chain and value chain transparency. There are talks about greenwashing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think CSR can be modeled in such a way where, consumers who want to have brand attachment, loyalty, want to see authenticity in the message that is being sent?
Yeah, this is definitely a key problem in CSR communication because a lot of the consumers, a lot of the people don't believe in it. They think it's just a tick in the box that big companies want to do to make themselves look good, but it's not real. So the way to negate that, if the benefit or if the campaign is real and it's valuable, the key is to, one, share a lot of detailed information about the campaign, how many things they did, how many schools or hospitals, how many patients, where is it, when did it, as much details as possible to show that this is real. Make it relevant and beneficial to the people as much as possible, and it should be something that provides long-term benefits. So it will not be seen as a hit and run. Thank you, we did something good, bye, we'll never see this again. It should be a long-term beneficial campaign. There will still be a small chance of skepticism and lack of trust, but these actions can try to bridge this gap a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, great presentation again.
Thank you.
I was curious, if you had to do the qualitative study, like you mentioned you were doing in study 2, what methodology would you employ for that? Like surveys or case study? I was just curious.
You mean for the qualitative part?
Yes.
I'll probably do interviews, semi-structured interviews from the people who, from the group, because there are 4 groups who watched the CSR campaign. And these are the people that I'm interested in, a much smaller group, of course, to get their deeper insights and ideas and thoughts. Why do they think this is better? And why they might have trust issues? How to overcome these trust issues? And yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. One more question over there, and then here. And did you also raise your hand? Yes, so here's more questions.
Hi.
Hi.
Just wondering if you looked at variations across age groups and gender.
Yeah, I did look a little bit about that, but I was focusing on people who are, of course, 21 plus, and they are the decisions of the household. So they are the ones who buy the product themselves. I didn't look at variation, but this can be an interesting way. I can easily, from my data, break it down because I already asked this question and see what's the difference between younger and older generation, because in literature, there has been evidence that younger generations in Egypt specifically are more inclined to think that way and be more interested in sustainability. Yeah.
Just a simple question. Why Egypt in particular? Is there a reason behind it? Or?
Yes, Egypt is becoming a rising hub for many multinational companies. And there are other regions in the Middle East. I'm focused on the Middle East because literature on CSR needs more contribution in this region. So there are regions in the Middle East like Arabian Gulf countries. These are 5 countries clubbed together, but Egypt is treated as a separate country from a business perspective because it's huge and the potential of it based on research is growing. So it's a lot of multinationals are interested to invest in this market. So the purpose is to direct their investment in a much more effective way for the companies and for society as well. Plus, I'm Egyptian, so.
Thank you very much. And we have a question.
Yes, I have a little question.
Sure.
It was a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thinking about the question the gentleman was asking, why it is in Egypt. So from the generalization perspective, do you think there is any cultural factor that can moderate your research?
100%. 100%. The culture and society in Egypt is very special and unique, just like any other country. So I don't think it can be generalized to more Western countries. But in Western countries and more developed countries like here, like the United Kingdom, there is extensive research on CSR, and the companies are investing in the Middle East and in countries like Egypt, but there isn't enough research. There isn't enough data from this part of the world. But that's what I would suggest for future research. A similar research can be done, but it has to be done from the beginning in different countries because it cannot be generalized.
Thank you very much. And then at the end there.
Yes.
Yes, well, it's good to see someone from LSBU. My question is this. Is there, aren't the two related? Because if you're doing CSR, a lot of it, you're talking about building clinics and so on. It's very local.
Okay.
And so don't you need communication in order to make people know that you've done this? So maybe
Yeah.
you are not both, but there's some kind of relationship, so you may have to look at that.
Yes, that's yeah.
And then I have another question.
Okay.
Whether you could test which type of CS, because CSR can take many forms, which type of it is effective.
Yeah.
And the third question is focusing on data, does it translate to other products? And so, your results.
Yes.
Anyway, you can come and talk to me after this.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nafra.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our third presenter, last presentation in this session, Muram Abadi from Kingston University, London. And I'm just going to do this. So oh, did I go back? I hope I didn't. Okay, with a very interesting presentation, because we all fly probably somewhere to different countries. Inspired by birds, morphing wings is the future of aviation. So over to you, Muram.
Okay. Hi, my name is Muram Abadi, and I'm a first-year PhD researcher at Kingston University, and I'm being sponsored by Air Charter Service to complete my research on the topic of inspired by birds, morphing wings as the future of aviation. Okay, so this presentation highlights the following: the problem in the industry goals. I'll talk a bit about the challenges with green aviation, biomimicry and my research, morphing wings as a solution, and finally, I'll speak about the sustainable impact. So what's the problem? Well, aviation accounts for 2.5% of global carbon dioxide emissions, and although this may seem like a small number, its warming impact is much larger. This graph shows the direct carbon dioxide emissions from the year 2000 all the way projected to 2030 for both international and domestic aviation. And you can see from the early 2000s up until 2019, the carbon dioxide emissions were increasing at an average of 2.3% per year. And in 2019, it hit its peak, producing over 1,000 million tons of carbon dioxide. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and this reduced significantly in 2020. But in 2021, it regained nearly over a third of the fall seen in the previous year. And this is only expected to grow rapidly in the oncoming years. So this is something that is very concerning. Hence why there are projected industry goals, such as the aviation's 2050 goal, which is to halve net carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. The Paris Agreement goal to limit global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius, and the International Civil Aviation Organization's goal is to gain a 2% annual fuel efficiency. Some people may think that these goals are a bit ambitious due to the challenges with green aviation. So the International Energy Agency, they're calling for revolutionary technology designs to try and combat this problem. However, the challenges with this is that innovative technologies, they need to undergo a long process of verification and validation to reach that technology readiness level that could be applied onto civil aircrafts. But there is a lot of ongoing research by engineers and scientists. And these are just a few areas, just to name a few. Reducing the aircraft weight by looking at advanced materials. Improving propulsion efficiency by investigating fully electric aircrafts. And a sustainable aviation fuel such as hydrogen fuel cells. But what if I told you we can make a significant impact to sustainability in aviation by incorporating morphing wings? So what are morphing wings? Well, morphing wings are bio-inspired wings. They're inspired by the biomimicry of the flapping motion of birds' wings. And they're adaptive wings that can seamlessly shapeshift to changing mission environment during flight. So I'm just going to show you a video of an eagle flying in slow motion, and just notice how the shape of the wings change as the bird is flapping its wings up and down. So while flapping, a bird can systematically change the shape of its wings to produce aerodynamic effects, similar to what you'd find on high-lift devices on aircrafts. For example, a bird may twist one wing downwards to reduce the angle of attack and the corresponding lift, while the other wing is twisted upwards to increase the lift. And with the different degrees of twisting between the bird's wings, the bird is able to roll. And this is similar to what you'd find on ailerons on aircrafts. But for a bird to be able to deform and change the shape of its wings, an adaptation in its skeletal and muscular systems is required. However, the key features that seem most desirable are changes and modification in the camber, which is the curvature of the wing, and the flexing of the wing planform area, as you can see between upstroke and downstroke motions. So the aim of my research is to try and tackle these aviation emissions by developing an optimal morphing wing design that can improve flight efficiency at different stages of flight. This image shows two aerofoils. An aerofoil is basically just the side view profile of a wing shape. The bottom aerofoil represents a wing with a conventional flap that you see in most aircrafts today. And the top aerofoil represents a wing with a morphed trailing edge. And you can see from the flapped airfoil, it has a more rigid structure at the trailing edge, whereas the morphed aerofoil has a more smooth, continuous profile. And so this makes it more aerodynamically efficient because the airflow is able to travel across the wing much more smoothly without any major disruptions. And just to support my statement, I ran some aerodynamic analysis on these two different types of wings, and you can see that the morphed wing actually produces a significant larger lift across various angles of attack compared to the flapped wing. So morphing wings is a solution. It has many advantages, such as increased aerodynamic performance, as I've just briefly explained, an increased fuel efficiency and reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So these are just some lead examples of morphing wing developments in the industry. So the top one, which is the F-111 bomber, has a mission adaptive wing that was designed by NASA, and the wing could actually flex similar to birds, and this increases the aerodynamic performance at different flight speeds, so supersonic, subsonic, etc. More recently, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner has a trailing edge variable camber mechanism that can actually reportedly save fuel weight up to 340 kilograms. And the Airbus A350 XWB-900 has a leading edge and trailing edge actuating mechanism, and this can also improve the lift-to-drag ratio during cruise. So what does this have to do with the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, morphing wings can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals because these optimized adaptive wing shapes can reduce the aircraft drag, which will increase the aerodynamic performance. This will lead to a lower fuel consumption and hence will increase the fuel efficiency. This will lead to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and ultimately result in a decrease of its warming impact, which is the main goal. So this contributes nicely to SDG 9, the Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure, which is all about investing in scientific research and innovation. And it stresses the importance of this to facilitate sustainable development. The Climate Action SDG 13 to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And an interesting statement made by the International Energy Agency is that aviation stakeholders can lead by example. And those that act early will benefit not only from corporate social responsibility, but they'll be the first to gain experience in these innovative practices. And this is something that Air Charter Service recognise, which is why I'm being sponsored to conduct my research in this area. So I just want to say special thank you to Air Charter Service and my supervisors for their continued support in our efforts to contribute to these Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Very interesting research. So good luck with that. It's really fascinating. And who knows what else we can do. From a consumer's perspective, I just wanted to say that it's interesting that we are not saying, let's tell people not to fly. And I think if I asked you in the room, do you want to stop flying? No one would probably say no. And everyone would say others need to stop and let's do something else. I know because I'm doing that too. So we have a few minutes for questions, comments. Okay, first, second.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Really interesting. I was wondering how long it would take between final stage of technology readiness to actually being implemented in industry, and in terms of having to replace infrastructure and a whole lot.
Yeah, so as I touched on earlier, it does take a long time. And that's why people are going as far as to even say that we should limit the number of passengers flying per year as a quick fix. But this is not very feasible. That's not really going to happen. And so these innovative technologies do take time. But with morphing wings specifically, I think they're being applied onto UAVs and drones, for example, because it's easier to carry out the flight testing on a drone or a UAV, not a civil aircraft, for example. So it is being tested, and there's something that I think is slowly being applied into the industry. As I said, the Boeing 787 recently actually incorporated a trailing edge actuating mechanism, so that actually improves the flight efficiency, but just at the wing tip. But there's still a long way to go, and there's so many, as you saw the bird flying, eagle flying, you could see all the different geometric changes that we can actually look into and investigate to try and increase the aerodynamic performance and get the most optimal design, which is what I'm trying to do. But yeah, it will take time, but I do see it actually being implemented in the future. And I think, I strongly think in the future, you'll see a lot of aircrafts with morphing wings. I think flaps and slats, for example, they change the shape of the wing, but as I said, it's not as aerodynamically efficient as a morphed wing. So that will slowly start to become a thing of the past. So, and I think this is the future. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I have two questions. The first is, are we going to have moving wings in airplanes just like the Eagle, or just optimize wing shape design?
Yeah, so maybe not the whole wing will be flapping up and down, but for example, you can look at the front of the wing, which is what you would usually find a slat at the front of the wing, and then at the back you'd see flaps. So I'm sure you've been on, have you had like a window seat next to an aircraft wing, and you can see a flap being deployed? It makes a lot of noise, actually. This is another thing that morphed wings can probably reduce noise emissions. But yeah, having just those seamless transitions. So instead of having like a gap in between all of these slats, it'd be more seamless. And so this would be a more optimal design configuration.
And then the second question would be, how are you testing this? Are you doing wind tunnel tests or computer simulation?
Yeah, so I'm doing CFD, so computer simulations, and then my plan is to validate my numerical results with wind tunnel testing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And there was, over there at the back.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask if you or your research team thought about maybe any barriers in terms of public acceptance or public uptake once that becomes a finalized product and introduced to public.
Public uptake, what do you mean?
So just the idea of like people have a lot of fears about flying, changing the design completely people might be scared to maybe take this and then take the CO2 heavy option rather than changing and trying a new type of plane.
Oh yeah, no, I understand that, but we've come a long way, and there's always going to be improvements in the design, and we're going to have these innovation. But I think it's just slowly being implemented, so you're not going to see like crazy looking aircraft overnight. Like this is something that's slowly being incorporated. Actually, if I just go back. So the F-111 bomber, this mission adaptive wing was actually designed in the 1980s. So this idea of morphing wings has been around for a long time, but that's on a bomber. But on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which is a commercial aircraft, that's only been incorporated recently. And that's just a small bit that's been morphing at the wing tip. It's not a massive change. So I think it's slowly getting there. And I think that would just seeing little bits of improvements over time with the aircraft design, then I think it won't be as scary for the public to want to get on an aircraft like that. You know, right?
I think also the question is, do we today know about all the changes that happen to aircrafts? Are we being asked? Should we be asked as consumers? I guess I know that had I known about some of the changes, I would probably be also quite hesitant and anxious. But it's a good question. What if we see it really differently with the plane at some point?
Yeah, I think these changes and modifications, it's just a slow process. Yeah, so yeah.
Just a little question. I'm not sure which phase you are in your research. I'm not a technical person. I'm from another background. However, I'm just curious to know. I mean, is there any feasibility study? I mean, there should be some feasibility study. Did you do anything yet about the financial aspects of this project? I mean, whether it will be easy to adjust with the, I mean, you know, there should be a lot of changes. I mean, this is a very big industry, and to adopt a new technology, it will take time. And how did you ever think about this? Whether it will be financially feasible?
Yeah, no, I had to do a feasibility study actually just before I started my PhD. I started just a few months ago in October, so I still have a long way to go. But in the beginning, we did look at, we did do a feasibility study. But I think with any innovative technology, you would have to do maybe like a trade-off study as well to see, for example, is increasing the aerodynamic performance, does that outweigh, I don't know, the cost of increasing the weight with the design, because you'll have to implement an actuating mechanism. So you'd have to do a trade-off study to really see. But I did do a feasibility study, and it is feasible from what I've done.
Any other questions? This one in the back.
I might have missed it, but does your study have any support from any organization? Like, I mean, are the airlines interested? I mean, is the International Civil Aviation?
Oh, I'm being sponsored by Air Charter Service. So I think they also recognize the importance of investing in scientific research that can contribute to green aviation. And so, yeah, that's something that they're supporting me with.
And one other question? Did I see someone? No.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is becoming something that aircraft manufacturers, they're constantly competing with each other to come up with innovative designs and be the first to practice in these sustainable developments. So that is something that we're pushing forward. And as I said, there's so many goals in the industry to try and facilitate sustainability. So that's definitely what is happening at the moment. and where I see it going in the future.
Motivated by like competition for contracts that will preference these that have a low carbon footprint as opposed to all, I don't know, like cost efficiency in terms of fuel efficiency.
I think it really depends. I think it's a bit of both. I would say lowering the carbon footprint because, yeah, we're trying to limit global temperature rise. And of course, if we can make even just a small difference by changing the design of an aircraft to help reach that goal, then yeah, that's important to me. So that's something I stand by.
Thank you very much. Great, thank you very much. That was the third and the last presentation, and that's the end of this session. It's time to have a break and join other sessions a bit later. Thank you very much for attending this